Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show with SportsbookReview.com. I'm your host, Lee Martin, here to talk some UFC. Joining me today, like always, I have SBR's UFC expert, David Manyun, and MMA Mania's lead host, Matt Ryan. Before we get into all the good stuff, like always, go ahead, give us a like and subscribe to our channel. That way you never miss a show. Now let's get to it. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. And before we jump into this weekend, let's jump back to the previous weekend where we had Holm versus Irene Aldana. And Dave, I'm going to start with you, and I want to see how your weekend went.
It was really good. I'm even starting to surprise myself, because each and every week it's, 7-1, 8-1, 8-2, doing quite well. Biggest surprise from that kind of pleasant surprise was actually the first fight of the night for me, Luigi Vendramini. He came through and knocked out his opponent in the first round, and that set the precedent for the night, really. Real entertaining. We did have a few more, decision fights than I actually expected, like the Charles Jourdain fight. I thought Imavov was going to get it done inside the distance, to be fair. And then, obviously, the main event, as expected, Holm by decision, the overhit. Irene just weren't there. She's. I don't think she's ready for that just yet. We spoke about how the experience of Holm was huge, and that pulled through in the end. It was a great event. Went 8-2, I believe, 6-0 on bets and 8-2 on straight predictions.
Well, great. Well, good job. How about you, Matt? How did your weekend go?
Quiet. Everything's on fire. It's not like, everything in the world's on fire. But it seemed like I walked out of the weekend pretty good. Jermaine Durandamy coming through with the submission win. You had Holm going all 5 rounds. No, what a shock. Dave, what a shocking surprise that Holm went the distance. I called the news. I tried to get, the New York Times on the line. This was, we all knew it was coming. Come on.
Yeah.
It's like, And after what, from Friday to now has been, if you live in the United States, has been a surreal fever dream. So the fact that we're actually talking about fights is a welcome change. And Holm going all 5 rounds, that level of normality was much needed in the Ryan household this past weekend.
Yeah, no, that was a great fight. And also Carlos Condit for plus odds. Great job right there. All right, now let's just jump into this weekend just because we have a stacked card. We have 13 total fights, 7 in the prelims, 6 in the main card. So this is going to be a very great card, in my opinion. And we're back at Yas Island. So let's just jump into it. For the first fight, we're going to have featherweight Youssef Zalal versus Ilia Topuria via Bet Online, if I can find your name. Zalal is minus 185 and Topuria is plus 160. And Matt, I'm going to start with you. If you can give us your breakdown and pick for that fight.
Well, if Youssef Zalal loses this fight, I will, on our next show, eat my hat. I will eat a hat right here. I'll prepare it maybe, sunny side up with some eggs. I don't know. Olive is maybe a nice tapenade in honor of my dog. But when you look at this fight, Zalal's on a 4-fight winning streak, his last 3 since joining the UFC. And those 3 fights, this is his 4th UFC fight and also his 4th fight of 2020. This is the year where if you're a fighter who just likes to punch people in the head, the UFC has opened up for business and saying, hey, come on through. Come have fun. Come do something. Come do. Mother, I crave violence. And that's what Youssef Zalal is. Before his 4-fight winning streak, he had 2 straight decision losses, one of them on a split decision. Before that, he had a 6-fight winning streak, all by submission or TKO. But let's take a look at Ilia Topuria really quickly. He's 8-0. This is his UFC debut. He's not fought since November of last year. So when you look at the disparity in productivity for 2020, there's a huge mountain that Topuria has to climb. His last loss was disqualification back in 2016 and has had 4 straight wins by stoppages. Oh, pardon me, I'm looking at the wrong note here. He's had 7 submission wins, 1 KO, and his fights have left the first round once. He has made it to the second round in only 1 fight in his professional career, and he ended up getting a submission back in 2016. So if you're looking at this fight, I would avoid the over. If I were you, I would say this fight is not going to last all that long. You're looking at two guys that are ready to throw down, ready to throw hands. I think the spotlight, Topuria is going to get caught up in the spotlight. He's going to be hyper aggressive, over aggressive. If you look at his resume, first round stoppage, first round submission, stoppage. And I think Zalal, the more tested fighter of the two, the one that's been able to acclimate himself to the octagon and also to Flash Forum. You're fighting in Dubai in October. It's probably not going to be the coolest weather outside, especially when it's going to be like 7 o'clock in the morning there. I'm going with Zalal, straight cash money. I think this fight maybe ends early round number 2. Someone's tapping or someone's snapping.
Yep, you can't go wrong with Zalal. Now, if you guys want to get in, again, Zalal is minus 185 and Topuria is plus 160. Let's move on to the next fight. We have heavyweight Tom Aspinall versus Alan Baudot. Aspinall is minus 625 and Baudot is plus 450. Dave, I'm going to start with you on this fight. If you can give us your breakdown and pick.
Sure. I'm going to start with, I'm going to point out here that this card has a trend and it's quite an obvious one. There's a bunch of heavy favorites, and more likely than not, these favorites are going to win. Tom Aspinall is one of those guys for me. And look, this is a guy in Baudot who's French versus a guy in Aspinall who's English. This is England versus France. We already know who I'm going to be siding with. It's not just based on the odds, based on the location and, you know, how I've been following Tom Aspinall. Look, Alan Baudot making his UFC debut this weekend, and the level of competition that this guy has defeated is, you know, the bar is real low. Like he hasn't fought anyone. Like literally, he hasn't fought anyone with any type of threat. He trained. The best I can take from this guy is his training partners, Francis Ngannou, Cyril Gagné. And do you know what? This kid just don't strike me as just a guy in the heavyweight division who's going to come through and find success. I'd probably prefer to see him at light heavyweight. I know he walks around at about 200 pounds, and that's just, it's not something I'm going to put confidence in, especially in your debut fight against a guy in Tom Aspinall. Aspinall is a great jiu-jitsu practitioner, and he is highly respected in that field. And then once he'd accomplished that part of his life, he moved on to boxing and decided he wanted to be a pro boxer. And who does he train with? He trains with Tyson Fury. So that says it all for me. That's enough, right? He's got great boxing skills. Combine that with the jiu-jitsu, he's going to be a problem in the future for this division as a whole, let alone his opponent who's never fought in the UFC before this weekend. I'd say this might be a little bit of a reach because, you know, I do follow my fellow countrymen, but I'd say he's one of the best boxers in the division. And if Stipe is still around in the future and Aspinall can storm this heavyweight division, I'd love to see a boxing fight between those two, because I seriously do put Tom Aspinall up there. And then, as mentioned, when you combine that with the jiu-jitsu skills that he's got, I just don't see her looking for Alan Baudot at all. Baudot lost to a guy called Tom Stout, right? He lost via choke. And then this was reversed to a win in his favor because USADA pulled up Stout for cannabis. And his last, he should be riding a loss here. He lost that fight. He got choked out in a guy in Tom Stout who isn't really much to run home about. So for me, the odds say it all. In this fight, it's Tom Aspinall's fight to lose. We're looking at this line just go up and up. Now, this is where you have to make sure you shop for your odds. Use sportsbookreview.com, because I am looking at odds for Aspinall at minus 480, and then you go to a couple of other books and we're looking at 625. Some of these lines are a 200-point difference. That's absolutely huge in your long-term betting. So yeah, if you are going to take Aspinall either in a parlay or, you know, pay up the price that's available, then just make sure you shop for your odds, because they're all over the place for this fight.
Yep, and you can shop for your odds at sbrodds.com. Great tool to use. Now, how about you, Matt? Do you agree with Dave? What's your take on the Aspinall and Baudot fight?
So Baudot is walking into a lion's den. He's only had 3 fights in the last 3 years. He's going up against a guy, as Dave said, trained with Tyson Fury. The man has murder hands. If you've ever watched a Tyson Fury fight, except the Otto Wallin fight, that fight doesn't count. But if you watched his fights against Deontay Wilder, I won't, my opinions on Tyson Fury are varied and fluid, mainly because I love him as a fighter, but when you look at Aspinall, this is his second UFC fight. His first debut back in July, he got a TKO victory. He's got 4 straight wins by stoppages. His last loss was a disqualification back in 2016. And Baudot, coming into this, he's fought in the EFC, which is South Africa's biggest and I think only mixed martial arts promotion. And he had a DQ loss back in April of last year that was overturned by the promoter. So it's MMA outside of the Western Hemisphere is wild. But he's only had, as I said, only 3 fights in the last 3 years. But if you're looking at this fight, if you're looking to, have a little fun and make a wager, not only look at the odds over at sbrpicks.com, but I would go with Aspinall here. Cleaner record, more varied fight, and also the UFC experience. You can't bet against that, especially against a guy who's debuting and has not really fought the same level of competition overall in terms of training.
Yep. Well, if you guys want to get in on that fight again, Aspinall is -625 and Baudot is +450. Now let's move on to the next fight. We got middleweight Markus Perez versus Dricus du Plessis. Via Bet Online, du Plessis is -156 and Perez is +136. Matt, I'm going to continue with you if you can give us your breakdown and pick for that fight.
All right. Du Plessis, another EFC veteran, former EFC champion. He also was a KSW veteran, so he's fought internationally before. He has a level of experience. He's fought some really the EFC has some solid fighters. We've seen fighters from the EFC make the UFC transition before. Not all of them reaching a similar level of success, but another guy who has not seen a decision in his entire career. Only 4 of his fights have seen the 3rd round, but Markus Perez, he's 3-2 in his last 5. All of those fights taking place in the UFC. We saw him lose back in November to Wellington Thurman, and since joining the UFC, he's been up and down. He's got 10 fight. He had a 10-fight winning streak stopped when in his UFC debut, so it goes up and down. I'm going to go with the in theory, underdog, the debuting du Plessis here. I'm going to go with him. I'm going to go with the South African fighter because there's always this one wild card fight that you really can't put your finger on. And for me, I think it's this fight. And KSW is not, just, regional fight championship combat in like Dubuque. It's an actual legitimate promotion. It's a big promotion over in Poland. I'm going to go with him. I'm going to go with du Plessis. I think he's going to go 15-2, and he's going to make a statement in his UFC debut.
All right, well, how about you, Dave? Do you agree with Matt, or do you have a different take on that fight?
Look, there's a handful of guys outside of the UFC who I will show respect to. One of them came in last week, Dusko Todorovic, and we've got another guy here in Dricus du Plessis, who I believe already has what it takes to compete in the UFC. Matt mentioned his time in the UFC as a multiple division champion EFC and a former welterweight KSW champion, and he's only 26 years old. Even in his, if he loses this weekend, I can't see the UFC cutting him and throwing him to the side. This kid is incredible. Like, if I'm gonna tell you guys to go and watch somebody before this weekend, then Dricus, he is the guy. He's one of the most entertaining martial artists outside of the UFC. He's never gone to a decision, and he's never been finished. So debut on 16 days notice, not the best. It's the pandemic UFC. It's what we're doing, right? He's fought the high-level fighters outside of the UFC, which is a huge advantage because, it's not like Perez is going to be, it's not going to be a huge step up for him. He's already fought high level of competition. He's an incredible striker. He mixes up all the attacks in his striking, from kicks, punches, and then he's got a little background, a little wrestling background in his pocket too. As mentioned, age 26, the world is at his feet. I love this kid, and I have to back him. Now, you have to pay attention to the odds, right? as I mentioned last week, Dusko coming in as a debuting UFC fighter against an opponent who already has UFC experience, but the odds makers are putting him as a favorite. There's a reason for this, and there's a reason why Plessis is coming as a favorite this weekend against a guy in Markus Perez, who he's not no bum. He's a dangerous finisher. Yeah, I think his previous 4 wins all came inside the distance. He's training at American Top Team. On paper, he has the better team behind him. And to be fair, on paper, he's not done that bad. I think it was he had a win over Ian Heinisch before he came to the UFC. I thought that was impressive. He subbed Ian Heinisch in the first round, and then he made his debut and lost to Eric Anders. And it was like, oh, okay. He fought, I can't remember who he beat after. He had a win after, and then he loses to Andrew Sanchez, and he gets another win on his record after that, and then loses to Wellington Turman. Them losses right there, Wellington Turman and Andrew Sanchez, I just can't put my money behind that, especially when you watch the tape on Plessis. He's so entertaining. I think he's going to come in this weekend. He's going to want to put it all on the line, and I think he could become the first person to put Markus Perez out inside the distance. The odds may be surprising to some, but as I mentioned, watch these odds because it's very suspect when a debuting fighter who never fought in the UFC is, for some reason, a favourite like this. So, yeah, for me, it's all Plessis, and I will be taking the debuting fighter this weekend.
All right, well, I guess we shall see. Again, if you guys want to get in on that fight, again, via BetOnline, Duplessis is -156 and Perez is +136. Let's move on to the next fight, and I am looking forward to this fight. We have heavyweight Ben Rothwell versus Marcin Tybura. Via BetOnline, Rothwell is -160 and Tybura is +140. Dave, I'm going to continue with you if you can give us your breakdown and pick for that fight.
Sure, we got Big Ben back in the octagon again. He's a UFC legend. This guy is just a stalker in the cage. That's all I see him do. When you watch fight tape on Ben, when he's not getting, beaten down by a high level opponent, he will be walking down his opponents and just waiting to let loose. He's not the most technical guy in his approach to his offense. Quite sloppy, but do you know what? That's works. And who am I to, slate this man for his sloppiness when he's defeated names like Vince St. Preux and Alistair Overeem. Unlike a lot of heavyweights, Ben he's not going to get, if the fight goes to the ground, he's not going to lay there and do nothing. This guy is going to be submission hunting. He's going to smother you out with his large body, and he's going to make it so uncomfortable. He's going to drain that energy. And I don't know if anybody remembers the Josh Barnett choke way back in the day, but something about Benny, them 10-finger chokes under the neck. I worry if I'm fading and I'm picking against Ben. These are the types of things I worry about, like a guillotine from a stacked mount that he had on Josh Barnett. It was beautiful. So I do worry fading him. He is going to be the bigger guy of the two, and in Tybura's previous fight, he was basically fighting a middleweight light heavyweight. So I'm not sure if Tybura is going to be ready for this size and he's going to be able to keep that cardio up. But as of now, I do have to favour Marcin Tybura, and I'll tell you why. So long as he can avoid the grappling with Ben, keep his cardio to a steady level, he should have a huge speed and technical advantage on the feet. I feel like Tybura can sail to a decision victory here as long as he avoids those draining grappling exchanges, which Ben Rothwell's really good at. We watched him do it to OSP. We've watched him do it in multiple different fights, and it's just that pressure. Big Ben has that pressure, and unless you put him out, he's gonna just continue walking you down. I think it's going to be the speed difference for me in this one. Now, it's hard to gauge that with Tybura's last fight because he was fighting a guy in Maxim Grisham who already mentioned is more of a light heavyweight, and the speed, he had the speed disadvantage. But with Rothwell's plodding heavy pressure, it's just going to bring a different aspect to it. Something that I think Tybura can handle. But yeah, for me, this is a case of Ben Rothwell is going to get this done inside the distance, or Marcin Tybura is going to win this by decision. Not to say that Tybura can't knock him out, because he can. Of course he can. This is the heavyweight division. I just feel like these are the two paths and the two outcomes that are most likely for me. Slightly with Tybura. Why? Because of the odds. Now, I understand the odds. The odds are favouring Big Ben. He's a legend. He's fought higher level of competition, arguably. Also, I've seen that people comparing Arlovski. They've both fought Arlovski, and Tybura won, and there was like 10 difference apart. Ben Rothwell fought a prime, monstrous Arlovski. Two different worlds, so it's hard to compare that fight. But I still, yeah, as mentioned, I do understand the odds. I can see why Ben is a favourite, but for me, that dogman is there. And I love dogmoney in the UFC, especially when it's just it's a real close matchup. So yeah, it is a numbers play for me this week, and I'm gonna have to go with Marcin Tybura, and I think he's gonna do it by decision.
All right, well, guess we'll see how that goes, because I really like Ben in this one, but I guess I got to look into it more. And before we get into your opinion on this fight, Matt, just real quick in the chat, hi, Mom. Hi, thanks for joining. All right, how about you, Matt? What's your take on this fight with Ben Rothwell versus Marcin Tybura?
I want to apologize for all the buzzing going on. I'm getting messages back and forth. What are my thoughts on this fight? Because as the resident larger gentleman in the room, when it comes to big boy fights, I am somewhat of an expert. And I have all of my friends who are much skinnier than I asking my opinion on this because, well, I am a fat man. But when we take a look at this fight, we take a look at the fact that Rothwell is on a 2-fight win. Both of these guys are on 2-fight win streaks. Tybura on both of them by decisions. Both of them have wins over Stefan Struve, which I feel like is obligatory if you're a heavyweight in the UFC with any kind of time in there. Not a slight at Stefan Struve, but the man looks like a giraffe in there. You've got 7 wins for Tybura by knockout TKO, 6 by submission, and 6 decisions. So he's got a variety of ways to beat you, but when it comes to grappling, as Dave said, Rothwell is a bit of a monster. Rothwell's last win was a split decision against Ovince St. Preux, and I know Lee loves OSP, but a split decision in the heavyweight division always gives me a little bit of pause, because if you're an elite heavyweight, you get stoppages, and you can't look past the fact that Rothwell earlier in his career has wins over Josh Barnett, Alistair Overeem, and Matt Mitrione, all who have achieved high levels of success in different portions of the MMA world. But all 3 of Rothwell's most recent losses were by decision. So the deeper this fight goes, the younger fighter is going to be the one with the advantage, and that is Tybura. And both of his last fights were won by decision. I'm going to go with Tybura by decision, not just because I liked what Dave said, but when you look at the way this fight breaks down, unless, as Dave said, if this fight goes to the ground, you give Rothwell the advantage. But Tybura here, just all the stats and all the things pack up, and as the deeper this fighter goes, the hotter it gets inside the flash form, from all the heat from the fact that they're in Abu Dhabi, on top of the lights, on top of everything else. The atmosphere there might be a big factor the deeper this fight goes, and you go with the better conditioned fighter, and to me, that's Tybura.
All right, well, that's great. Well, it's hard to not agree with Dave. He always has me thinking twice about my picks. But if you guys do want to get in on that fight, again, Rothwell is -160 and Tybura is +140. Now let's move on to the next fight, another good fight. We have featherweight Edson Barboza versus Makwan Amirkhani. Via Bet Online, Barboza is -265. Amirkhani is +225. Matt, I'm going to continue with you if you can give us your breakdown and pick for that fight.
This one's a tough one, because Edson Barboza is Edson Barboza, for God's sake. He had 3 straight losses, though, to Dan Ige, Paul Felder, and Justin Gaethje. His last win was against Dan Hooker back in 2018. He's lost 5 of his last 6. But you go against Amirkhani, he doesn't have the same level of resume. He did fight more recently back in July at UFC 251. This is Amirkhani's biggest fight to date inside the octagon, going up against a certified legend, Edson Barboza. And, he lost to Shane Burgos. He was stopped by Shane Burgos inside Madison Square Garden. So you kind of weigh all of these other factors, and it goes back to the Rothwell-Tybura fight. You play all the other, you take them out of the vacuum of pure odds and schedule and stats and all this other stuff, and you throw them in this particular simulation. 3 fights, dealing with the time change, dealing with the weight cut, dealing with the heat, dealing with all of this, you err towards the younger fighter. I'm going to go with Amirkhani, not as a slight against Barboza, but just playing all these other factors into it. I have to go with the fighter that is more likely to be comfortable within their surroundings, and I think that's Amirkhani.
All right. Well, how about you, Dave? Do you agree with Matt, or do you have a different take on that fight?
Totally disagree. Edson Barboza's gonna kick his head off. No, in all seriousness, no, I disagree on the pick. But you know, it's hard to fade Edson Barboza with those kicks. Now I know, looking at his record, it's like, oh damn, all those losses. But look at Carlos Condit last week. This is an opponent who I think Barboza can beat. Should he avoid the grappling? I think this is Barboza's fight to lose, and that's how Amirkhani needs to win this fight. He's going to have to go back to his wrestling background. He comes from a Greco-Roman freestyle background. He's got championships in both them disciplines, gold from tournaments. And look, critics are constantly overlooking the skills of Makwan, and I think he's great. I think he's a really good fighter. But do I think he can take out Edson Barboza in a striking fight? No, I don't. So Barboza's got this ugly record, which goes back the past 3 years. We can't ignore that. Right in our face, loss. But look who he's losing to, and look at the fights that took place. The Paul Fowler fight weren't, you know. He didn't. A split decision is not something, you know, to worry too much about. And everybody that Barboza has been fighting was under the UFC banner, and the majority of these guys are either in the top 10 or the top 15. I can't remember where Dan Ige was ranked, but I think Dan Ige was even in the top 15 when he fought Barboza in that last fight. Now, this would mean that Amirkhani is the first unranked fighter that Barboza has fought in a very, very long time. Now, it's hard to ignore. I don't care how long ago it was. We've got a guy in Barboza that's beat Anthony Pettis, Gilbert Melendez. Gilbert Melendez is one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners I know. So do I think Makwan Amirkhani is going to come out here, have his way and get some sort of submission on the ground? I don't. I think Barboza's got good wrestling defense. And do you know what one of the best wrestling defenses is? Kicks to the face and knees to the face. And all you have to do is go watch Barboza kick pads. He is a monster. And do you know what? We haven't been able to see that because of the level competition he's been facing. Now he's got a guy in Amirkhani, and I know that he's not used to this weight class, and his debut in this weight class was rocky for Barboza. But he's stayed in this weight class, so the loss hasn't phased him. I've got a feeling that he's going to feel comfortable at this weight now, and I think we could see the old Barboza turn up and give us some beautiful highlight reel to put an end to the night. Power takedowns, submission attempts are going to be expected from Makwan. I mentioned this in my co-main event breakdown article that every fight starts standing. And I've watched Edson get up. In fact, Barboza got up from Khabib. So do I feel like he can't get up from Amirkhani? No, I don't. Do I think Amirkhani is going to get a takedown? Probably. He's decorated in grappling. So that's not going to be a surprise. But when I think about the fight as a whole, across the 3 5-minute rounds, I have to side with Edson. It's annoying me because all of these odds on this card they're just juiced. It's going to have to be another parlay week, but I hit 3 parlays last week. So maybe I'll try and do the same again this week because these odds they're just all too high. I do think Edson's going to win, but would I feel comfortable in placing 250 on him, minus 250? I'm not too sure. Just because Makwan is good, and I don't want to be that guy that says don't underrate Makwan. He's good, and then he comes out and I'll go against him and he wins. So I do favor Edson. Just be cautious with this one though, as you know the odds they're pretty wild on this entire card as a whole.
Yeah. I was literally just looking at this entire card, and there's like 200s, 200s, 400s, 600. Like, this card's ridiculous. Yeah. All right, but that's great. If you guys do want to get in on this fight, again, via BetOnline, Barboza is -265, and Amirkhani is +225. Now, let's move on to the main event, the moment we've all been waiting for. All right, we have bantamweight Marlon Moraes versus Cory Sandhagen. Via BetOnline, Sandhagen is -130, and Moraes is +110. Dave, I'm going to continue with you. If you can give us your breakdown and pick for the main event.
Yeah, I think it's nothing stands out to me more in this fight than Cory Sandhagen and his big ass self in this division. Like 5'11", 60-inch reach, 40-inch leg reach, and one loss on his record, which came against the incredible Aljamain Sterling, who is on an absolute heater right now. I have to look at how Marlon's best chances of winning this fight, and I really think it probably would be jiu-jitsu and grappling. He's not going to want to take on the kickboxing of Cory. Cory is a very decorated kickboxer. He's excellent at switching stances, making his opponent think, the feints, kicks, punches, jabs, hooks, everything. Look, Cory's got everything when it comes to striking. Now, Marlon can strike, and Marlon, I'm not going to come out and say he's a bum. I just feel like when you compare the striking of these two men, there's a clear advantage for Cory. So now we have to look at Marlon, and is he going to be able to get this to the ground and get a submission? Aljamain Sterling was able to do it, but training with Sarah Longo and having them screaming at you in the corner to get a chokes, I'm not surprised. He fought a guy in Rafael Asuncao, and I believe if you can take on the grappling of Asuncao, not get knocked out by John Lineker, I have to favour Cory, and it's the size. The size is one of the main things that's getting me. I don't think Marlon's going to be able to touch him on the feet. So that leaves Marlon in a predicament where he has to get this fight to the floor and start making this a jiu-jitsu battle, or maybe even some ground and pound. But I just don't see that happening. I just really don't see that happening. I'm struggling with this fight. I'm not going to lie. I'm struggling to see how this may pan out, how it may end. But I'm favoring Sandhagen to get the job done. It's Moraes had his shot at capturing that bout, and Cory hasn't got there yet. I think the hunger and the size is what's going to win this fight for Cory Sandhagen. The appropriate game plan is obvious. Okay, Sandhagen, he's kickboxing expert, and the size there, it's gonna be a problem for the majority, if not all of them bantamweights. Moraes, he's such a tough dude, because you know what, I've faded Moraes in the past as well. It's bit me in the butt. I'm not gonna lie, it's bit me in the butt. I really think he's just gonna have to pull that black belt out and hope to get a finish early in a similar fashion to Aljamain, because if not, he's going to have to stand there with a guy who's come from a kickboxing background who can kick your head off any point of the fight. So on paper, yes, Moraes, he does have an impressive resume. But Sandhagen's skills and what he's shown us so far, I really do think that's enough to give Moraes a problem this weekend. And I'm taking Sandhagen. I think I gave him out at -155. I'm not sure if them odds have swayed. I see the line's getting better, and I genuinely think it's going to continue to get better before fight night. So I'd hold out probably until Friday or Saturday and then place your bet. Because as of now, Sandhagen is heading towards underdog money. He opened as the underdog. The public bet him to the favourite, and now the public are slowly putting him back as the underdog. So, yeah, watch this line. Don't bet this line early. It's a line that you want to wait, sit and watch.
All right. Well, how about you, Matt? Do you have a different take on the main event, or who's your pick?
All right. So while Dave was giving his breakdown, I kept bouncing back and forth in my head. Who do I go with in this fight? Because initially you look at the resume, you look at Moraes' resume. The last guy last loss he had was to Henry Cejudo for the vacant bantamweight title. And before that, he beat Jose Aldo. So you look at that and it's like, damn, he's fought nothing but killers. He beat Rafael Asuncao. He beat Jimmy Rivera. He beat John Dodson. He beat Aljamain Sterling. And when you look at a guy like Marlon Moraes, who was denied that opportunity to become bantamweight champion, and now Peter Yan is the bantamweight champion, and a fight between Yan and Aljamain Sterling is, all but guaranteed, in my opinion, unless Henry Cejudo, comes out of nowhere and decides that he's done doing whatever the hell it is he's been doing during quarantine and wants one of his belts back. For Moraes, this is a fight where he wants that belt back, he wants revenge, and he needs to make a statement. And going up against a kid like Sandhagen, who just came off a loss from Aljamain Sterling and has a win over another common opponent in Asunciao. And Moraes needed a second fight to get that win back against Asunciao. So it's the same thing as the Barboza Amirkhani fight. You've got a lot of different variables at play, and you look at the veteran and you're trying your best to build the case for both fighters. I think the deeper this fight goes, the better it is for Moraes, because Sandhagen is going to try to pull out all of his striking ability, try to wear him down, try to get it done early. But the deeper this fight goes, the more Moraes is able to find holes in Sandhagen's game. Sterling did it, and Moraes beat Aljamain Sterling. So the deeper this fight goes, the better it is for Moraes, but I think Sandhagen can catch him early. If you're looking to put a wager on a finish, I would go at Sandhagen in maybe rounds 1 or 2. If you're looking for a decision, if you think that the over is tasty, I would take Moraes.
All right, well, there you guys have it for the main event. If you want to get in on the action, again, via Bet Online, Sandhagen is -130 and Moraes is +110. Now, before we wrap everything up, I just have a couple questions for you. And Dave, I'm going to start with you first. Do you have like a favorite fight that you're looking into, like a top pick? Can you give us your top pick for this whole entire card?
Yep. I am very excited to see a kickboxing fight on the prelims. It's going to be Giga Chiga. I don't even pronounce his name. I always pronounce it wrong. Yeah, and Omar Morales. Now, Omar Morales, he is coming as the what did he open on? Sorry, let me just check these odds. Yeah, so he opened at -135. That line is slowly going up. I'm looking at some books now at -150, and there's a reason for that. Giga doesn't, even through his wins, he's winning in the UFC and he's still not impressing me. Split decisions, just not the guy. I think that Omar is going to come out here and beat the crap out of him, in all honesty. I gave it as in my article this week, I think it's going to be by decision, because for as much as I'm hating on Giga, I do think that this is just going to be a technical boxing fight, and I think it's going to go the full 15, and I think Omar is going to be the guy that comes out on top in terms of strikes landed, and I think that's how simple this fight is going to be. But it's also going to be an entertaining one, because they're both former kickboxers, and that's their thing. It's going to... I'd say best fight on the prelims for me, Giga and Omar, and I'm taking Omar straight. I was able to get him at -140, I believe, but that line's slowly going up. So If you want to follow what I'm on, then that's a fight that you might want to take sooner rather than later.
Yep, and currently at BetOnline, Omar Morales is -148 and Chikadze is +128. So how about you, Matt? Do you have a favorite prelims fight?
I don't have a favorite prelim fight, but I do have a favorite fight on the card, and it's Rothwell and Tybura. As I said before, as the resident large gentleman of this triumvirate, I've been a fan of mixed martial arts since the first UFC. I watched the first UFC live in an apartment in Brooklyn in 1993. I remember it very vividly, watching the first UFC. And the thing that struck me was just dudes beating the snot out of one another. And that is what the heavyweight division can be. There's a lot of heavyweight fights that on paper, you think it's going to be battle of the tough guys. You think for us, old school wrestling fans, it's going to be brawl for all. Someone's going to emergency, someone's going to jail, as Don Henley once sang. But Rothwell and Tybura is an interesting fight to me. The heavyweight division right now is in a weird state of flux at the top. John Jones has a continuing question mark if whether or not he's finally going to commit to fighting in that division. What's this division going to look like with a second continuation of the second Stipe Miocic reign? He seems like he doesn't want to fight Ngannou again, which is probably smart for his health and safety. But then you see other fighters within this division, and Are Tybura and Rothwell going to be heavyweight championship contenders in the near future? Probably not. They're gatekeepers in this division at this point. When you look at the level of competition that begins to open up over 205 pounds. But who doesn't like seeing fat guys just punch each other in the face? Hell, that's a cottage industry on the internet.
Well, I mean, that's a great fight to look into.
The heavyweight division, if you want to make that comparison, if you want to go back to UFC 1, the heavyweight division is the closest you can get to the original style UFC. We can see a guy who's 6 foot, 230 pounds, fight a guy who's 7 foot, 245 pounds. So, and the heavyweight division, it's the most entertaining division. I think it always will be in all combat sports. It's all about the heavyweights. It really is.
Let's look at this rationally. The heavyweight division is a 60-pound division. Because so 205 from 206 to 266 or 256, you can compete at.
Yeah.
That's like 4 or 5 divisions in the UFC. So you're looking at the disparity here in some of these fights where if this was any other division, not only would the athletic commission get involved, the unified rules would have to change. I think Dana White would have some sort of aneurysm. It's a ridiculous. The heavyweight division is a ridiculous concept, but that's what makes it so awesome. As you said, Dave, like there's so many different options and so many different ways heavyweight fights can break down that, like, let's just say Brock Lesnar versus, let's say, someone
DC.
Yeah, against DC. The weight disparity there alone, the look, the height disparity in the heavyweight division. Stefan Struve, as I talked about before, the man's a giraffe. I believe that he is 3 smaller fighters combined into one person. I've not been able to prove it yet, mainly because it's physically impossible. But a boy can dream. It's 2020. There are no rules anymore. So when you look at it from that perspective, you got to look at the heavyweight division. Anytime there's a heavyweight fight on the card, you're a little excited.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, that's all I have for today. And thank you guys so much for joining me today and dropping some knowledge like always. If you're not following the guys on Twitter, definitely give them a follow. You can follow Dave at @DManyun_ and Matt at MRyan Consulting. It's great to follow them because they always update it with their picks and whatnot. So definitely give them a follow. If you're not following SBR on Twitter and Instagram, you can give us a follow at SBR Sports Picks. And like always, if you want to get more breakdowns and picks from all of SBR's UFC experts, then just go to sbrpicks.com/UFC or click the link in the description below. Again, thank you guys so much. This was the main card breakdown and a little bit more for UFC Fight Night. Marlon Moraes versus Cory Sandhagen is going to take place this weekend, October 10th. I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you next week.
Peace.